showing how a priest who had been imprisoned inside the Vatican, in a Vatican jail for, I think, 4 years, for possessing huge amounts of pornography, and specifically child pornography, has just been reinstated in his position in the Secretariat of State, specifically the second section, which has the responsibility for the relations with the states. Liz Yore has the details on this. Liz, I know you've been following this closely. Tell me, is this as horrific as it sounds?
It has been, the Vatican is showing once again how tone deaf it is. Rules for thee, but not for me. I mean, it is shocking to me. Full disclosure, my background in law enforcement was one of the things that I did was create the National Cyber Tip Line, which allows Americans and people actually around the world to report child pornography and to a hotline, and we pass on those leads to law enforcement. We have here this Father Carlo Capella, who I remember this case very clearly in 2017. And I will give you kind of my insight from behind the scenes, not particularly about this case, but what this case is telling me. He was an ordained priest in the Archdiocese of Milan. He went into the diplomatic corps, which meant that he was part of the Secretary of State's office, and he was assigned to the most prestigious, one would argue, embassy, the U.S. Embassy, the Vatican Nunciature in Washington, D.C. This priest, Father Capella, went apparently in 2017 during a Christmas vacation to Canada. The Canadian officials, I presume it was the Royal Mounted Police, notified law enforcement and issued a nationwide arrest warrant for this cleric on charges of possession and distribution of child pornography. And when he was on vacation in Windsor, Ontario, this to me is this case is really emblematic of, we now hear that there's a great problem with child pornography in the clerical state. In 2013, the Vatican issued new, supposedly tougher guidelines. And so the U.S. State Department also notified the Holy See that there was this arrest warrant and asked the Holy See to waive a diplomatic immunity. They did not, and this priest fled to Rome. Fortunately, the Vatican charged him. And they have a criminal court, as you know, Ben, in the Vatican, as well as a canonical court. He was found to have more than 40 criminal images and videos, which he shared on social media. And
let me just stop you, Liz. Let me just stop you here, because I need a clarification. Occasionally, when people get investigated by the police for having dodgy images on their phone, it's something they may have received via WhatsApp or WhatsApp group. And of course, WhatsApp stores all the images that you receive automatically. So anyone adept at managing a phone will be able to go in there and they'll just scan and they'll say, oh, look, there was this image there or that image there. This isn't, I know you said this, that we're talking about 40 images here, but this isn't a case where anyone, even giving the best will in the world, can somewhat innocently say, oh, look, I don't know who sent this to me, I told them to stop doing it, or what have you. This is not only possession of images, but as you were just saying, just underline this point, possession and distribution, right? There's no generous interpretation one can give to this.
Child pornography. This computer of this priest came to the attention of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This was a computer that they were very concerned about by I would argue, the amount of child pornography that was on and the nature of child pornography. I won't go into details, but the videos of child pornography are so horrendous and so vile. And the victims in these cases, we argue in law enforcement that every time these videos are shared, these children are re-victimized. And so arguably these children are re-victimized for a lifetime, millions of times around the world. Well, the Vatican Criminal Court convicted him. He pled actually guilty, I believe, and he received 5 years and a fine. He was allowed they could have given him up to 12 years. But, again, in reading this article, it was quite interesting. When he was sitting in jail after being convicted, he had several visitors from the Secretary of State's department, and he was released. He was not laicized, unlike many priests. He was not, sent out to pasture like, many priests who want to say the Latin Mass. No, he was reinstated at the Secretary of State's office, the premier, highly prominent diplomatic corps in the Vatican, which, to me is number one, rewarding bad behavior, and number two, the statements coming out of the Vatican are just shocking. They wanted to give him mercy, show mercy to him. And,
Liz, let me stop you. Let me come in on this one, right? Because this is really the issue. And I don't want to preempt the story that Frank's going to go into in more detail later on in the show. But have you noticed the language almost is word for word? Because I know you've also been studying the situation of the French, I think it's Toulouse, the French archdiocese. Have you noticed that the language here in terms of the mercy is almost identical word for word? Here's my question to you. Do you think, studying these two cases specifically, that there might be some kind of Vatican secret protocol here on the rehabilitation of priests who've been convicted of some kind of sexual offence, in order to bring them back, to mainstream them, to normalise, if that would be the right word for this context. Because I'm curious about the similarity of the wording here in this case and the French case as well. And it's exactly what you're talking about here, about the mercy.
It is. And, it's political favoritism. I think that's what's going on in the Vatican, that their favorites. By the way, this priest was ordained by none other than Cardinal Martini, who was the founder of the St. Gallen Mafia, friend of Cardinal McCarrick. Obviously, this young priest was on a fast track in the diplomatic corps. And, it is shocking to read the statements from the Vatican saying that these crimes were a bump in the road, and that he was experiencing a period of fragility because he moved to the Washington embassy. I mean, he wasn't sent to Sudan. He wasn't sent to Nigeria or Yemen. He was sent to the most prestigious embassy in the world. It is shocking to me that once again, Ben, the victims are ignored. And here was really a teaching moment for the church to talk about the dignity of children and the exploitation of the internet and by people. And my reading of this story, in my opinion, there was a tremendous amount of child pornography on his computer, so much so that the US and Canada both were demanding action, and that this priest submit himself to jurisdiction in the United States. This was a serious case of child pornography. And yet, what did we see? Basically the Vatican, said our hands are washed. We're putting him back, because after all, where is he going? What is he going to do? Well, we know of bishops and priests in America who've done nothing wrong and have been sent out to pasture with no kind of mercy, just because they love the Latin Mass, right? And yet here, a man who violated the innocence of children by not only downloading child pornography, but sharing it around the world. I mean, just imagine. And they want to say, bump in the road of his clerical career. And he's back in charge, writing speeches for the Vatican Secretary of State and doing, the important work. And, a person like that in a place where they're assigning priests all over the world as diplomats, I mean, this to me shows the Vatican is not taking these crimes seriously after 50 years. This is an issue that they should be sounding the alarm. And yet again, they demonstrate that they're tone deaf and that they are not going to protect children. So it's, to me, let's see what Leo does with this case, right? Let's see what Pope Leo sends, looks at this case and puts this guy out to pasture. He does not belong in the church. He can go to a monastery as a civilian and pray for the rest of his life and do penance, but this man should not wear a Roman collar.
That's pretty much what Benedict imposed on Marcel Maciel, wasn't it? Have I mixed that up in my memory? Look, my final question to you on this, because then we have to move on. But you mentioned back in 2017, when this case first arose, that the US, it's going to be the Trump administration, right? The first Trump administration asked the Vatican to lift the diplomatic immunity on this guy, who was a fully fledged diplomatic official working for the nuncio, who must have been Vigano at that time, right? I think 2017, and the Vatican refused. They declined to waive diplomatic immunity. Let me just ask you a quick question, right? Give me 1 minute on this. Do you think there's any possibility this guy holds compromat on looking at how quick his unorthodox his reintegration has been back within the Secretariat of State? Do you think he might have something on his files that gives him an easier negotiating hand?
Well, one is left with that impression, aren't they? In fact, I don't think Vigano, I think, was gone by then, if I'm not mistaken. He was let go by Pope Francis. This was under Pope Francis. And, any other pope would have said, yes, he should submit himself to the jurisdiction of the United States for investigation and punishment. But this guy was really fast-tracked even through his criminal investigation and the Vatican. And the fact that they didn't laicize him when the laws and norms in the Vatican passed in 2013 provided for that. So you're left with the impression, oh, he is one of the favored ones, and we are going to exercise mercy instead of judgment on this guy. And so nothing's changed. To me, this sends a loud and clear message, not only to the Vatican, to all those priests that are violating these laws, but also to the people in the pews, that we have to demand justice and a change in the attitude towards these sexual crimes, which are horrendous, and which, they say, oh, well, there was no contact with children. Not on the computer, there wasn't by this priest, but on the computer, you would see these children being assaulted by other people.
Okay, Liz, thanks very much for that breakdown. We'll be coming back to you later on in the show.